Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello and welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. My name is Cody Sizemore, and I am joined here by my lovely co-host Maria Casillas. And today we've got some fun stuff to talk about. We always have fun stuff to talk about, and we're excited to talk to you guys about it. But before we get into any of that, I just want to say a few things. Number one, if this is your first time listening, we really appreciate you. Hopefully you get some value from today's show. And if you really do enjoy it, you want to leave a rating, or you want to share the show, or leave a review, we would really appreciate that, because we don't get paid for any of this stuff. We don't advertise on this show. So, your support is a really good and important way for us to continue to do this show and to get it out to more listeners. And for those of you who listen to us every week, you know what we call you. We call you the every weekers. And we just really appreciate you guys, because you're the thing that keeps this show going. Your endless support is definitely very much appreciated. So we want to say thank you to you guys as well. And then lastly, if you guys haven't checked out our Facebook group, it is free to join. It is called the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. And it's a really good place to jump in there, ask questions, talk to us, make connections, join in on certain events that we have going on, like, the meetups every month or the book club that we do. There's a lot of fun stuff in there as well. So with all that being said, I'm going to welcome in Maria, and we're going to get into this topic for you guys today and give you guys some good value. So Maria, good to see you.
Good to see you, Cody. Thanks so much. I'm actually really appreciative of the fact that you mentioned the book club and the meetup, because that's where this content is coming from today. So yeah, I mean, that's really where our best stuff comes from, is from our coaches anyway. So there was, I honestly don't remember whether it was a book study or a meetup. It really doesn't matter which one it was. But one of our favorite coaches was on there. Shout out to Bearcat. And we were talking about the idea of comparison. And I think we were originally talking about kind of the dangers of comparison. And then Bearcat brought up a really good example of a time when he actually thought that it was a good idea to allow some comparison when he was talking to one of his clients. So if I may, I thought maybe we could just have a discussion today about what is that tendency for our clients and for ourselves to start comparing ourselves to somebody else, some of the dangers around that, and then maybe an idea or two of what we can do instead. How does that sound like to you?
I love it.
Okay.
I love it. Take it away, sister.
That's awesome. So let's just have a discussion real quick about the tendency for us to compare. How often would you say that you or your clients tend to look to other people when kind of measuring their success, their failures, their worth, anything that is really measurable?
I would say probably every day and multiple times a day.
Oh gosh. Okay.
I mean, if you think about it, like our culture with social media and like the consumerism and all that kinds of stuff, like we live in a comparison culture.
Yeah.
It's almost like a plague in certain ways,
Mhm.
it's the real pandemic kind of thing, So
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that that's one of the things that you use the word plague. It plagues us, and it's something that is in our faces all the time. So if we are trying really hard not to do that, it has to be a conscientious decision that we're making. And as you said, multiple times a day. So if that's the case, why do you think we actually try to do that? Like, what information do you think we're trying to gain from having that comparison with somebody else?
It could be a number of things. I think that number one would just be validation. Especially with right now, with even like the last 4 to 5 years, things have been very challenging financially for people. So it's a way for them to feel better about their situation, what they have going on, and it's a measurable thing too. It's not anything that's like I think I'm doing okay, or I feel like I'm doing okay. we as humans, I feel, like to have facts, and we like to measure things and compare
Hmm.
things side by side.
Concrete.
Um, I mean, whether it be visual or whatever it might be, so that it's just a way for us to validate ourselves and
Hmm.
for us to see like, hey, are we doing okay? And if not, then what do we need to be doing? And if we are, then cool. Like, we feel better about ourselves in certain ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's true. Um, it's almost as if we need to see how we measure up. And I'll tell you a little bit later about something I do, but I actually use that term measure up in one of the handouts that I offer to my clients because it just seems like one of those desires. Like we need to measure up to whatever. I think one of the dangers, though, is that when we're looking at what somebody else does, it's all about perception. So, like, there's not always a truth that's underlying that. We see what somebody looks like or what they drive or where they live, and we have this perception of, I don't know, like their success. And then when you start digging below the surface, you're like, oh, no, 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 they're actually not super successful. They're living in fear and in I don't know, disarray oftentimes.
Hmm.
And then you look at the person and you're like, "Oh, they really don't have anything." And you realize they're actually sleeping super well at night, and there are things that don't bother them.
Hmm.
And maybe they took a really long time to get there. And all of those things I think are one of the dangers of just doing it by looking at somebody. So you mentioned social media, mentioned I think you mentioned that. Um and that's like the epitome of looking at something and not really being able to dig. And that's mostly because people will put their best self out there. I mean, it's very seldom do you see somebody airing out their dirty laundry and on social media. And so you're just seeing that surface level stuff. And if you're
Hmm.
comparing where you are right now, in your disheveled self, comparing that to somebody who just looks put together all the time, that's going to be A, disheartening, but B, also very unrealistic.
Hmm. Hmm. So I hear what you're saying. I completely agree with all of it. However, there is one little wrinkle
Okay,
that I want to iron out
let's
with
iron
you.
it.
So you were talking about you're basically taking two, avatars, someone who has the nice car, the nice house, the nice this, the nice that, and maybe they actually are living in fear, they have a ton of anxiety, they're stretched thin, all that kinds of stuff, right? And then
Mhm,
you talk about the other person who maybe doesn't have those things, maybe they have just like decent things or okay things, but they're sleeping well at night and stuff like that as well. Which I
mhm,
think that is the case quite often with a lot of people, especially with like, us being financial coaches, like we see people with, these nice cars who have, a $1,400 payment attached to it and they're stressed out about it. Like we
mhm,
see that,
mhm,
so it's very easy for us to say that. However, you also said the word dangerous. And I would venture to say that even talking about this in this light could be dangerous in certain ways. And what I mean
mhm,
by that is that we often in the financial space, especially one person in particular, which everybody knows, so I don't need to say his name, but one person in particular, we tend to almost vilify some quote unquote success, because there are people who have the nice car, who have the nice house, who have things together, who sleep really well at night,
mhm,
and who actually are successful.
mhm,
So if we're too eager to like look at those people and just paint it of like, oh well, they because they have this, then they're probably just struggling, right?
mhm.
That's also dangerous because
Agreed.
what we're basically doing is we're just telling the world, we're telling the universe, we're telling God, hey, those nice things and that success is actually attached with a bad quality of life.
Mhm,
And that is I think also dangerous. So you said something later on which I really appreciate that you said, which was, we have to get away from looking at the surface and actually dig deeper and see what's
yep,
actually going on there. And I think that that's the important thing, even with like trying to learn, because with comparison, you're comparing on the surface, but you're also trying to learn on
mhm.
the deeper end of things.
Hopefully. That's
Yes,
right, yep.
yes,
Mhm,
hopefully, right? And if you're actually trying to learn, and you do that digging, you'll find the people who are the quote unquote frauds, and you'll find the people who are legit. And it's the ones who are legit that you should not compare yourself to or feel bad about, but instead learn from.
And aspire. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. And I'm glad that you ironed that wrinkle. It's something that I wanted to just show the two extremes of
Mm-hmm.
that. But yes, that is the whole thing, is we need to make sure we're digging a little bit below that surface
Exactly.
to really
Yep.
see. And knowing how important words are and putting stuff out there, I'm really glad that you were able to bring that up, because it is one of the things that if you not compare, if you put those two things together and assume all the time that that's what that avatar looks like and that that's what their life looks like, it will be very easy to, like you said, just bring that about almost and
Mm-hmm.
put that negative thing on there. So I appreciate that. um with all that being said, the idea of aspiring to, I think, is really important. Like, if we know that we want to get to a certain spot, finding people who have gotten there is a really good way to do that. And I know you
Mm-hmm.
agree with that. And I'm sure most of our listeners agree with that as well. And so I think it is a good idea to, like you said, learn. And when I said, hopefully that's what you're doing, that's what I mean by that. What's the alternative? If someone's not trying to learn through comparison, what are they trying to do?
Stroke their own ego.
Okay. All right. There could be some of that. And I think part of it's also like the reverse of that validation. It's validating where they are. It's almost excusing where they are. So if you can look at somebody who hasn't done as well as you have, then you compare that way, but you
Mm-hmm.
know that you could be doing so much better. It's easy to go, well, I'm doing okay because this guy over here,
Right.
he's not doing anything, right?
Right.
So part of it could be that, and maybe that's where some of that ego comes in as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm doing okay, pat myself on the back. So yeah, I mean, there are definitely dangers in both directions. And one of the things that I'll give you the example that Bearcat brought up, because I think it's something that most of our listeners probably will have kind of talked to their clients about. I will say Bearcat is a financial advisor. And so what he talks to his clients about might be a little bit more detailed than what any of us is allowed to talk about. So I'm going to just throw that disclaimer out there. But I think he was running some numbers with some clients, and I don't remember their ages. I don't remember all these details. But what I remember was that they are living paycheck to paycheck in their minds, right? So they've been putting stuff aside for their retirement, and he was running some numbers for them, and he was saying to them, in 20 years you are going to have this amount of money. And it was something where it was kind of like, you're actually, I think he was saying they're going to be okay, but they had a really hard time owning that idea
Mm-hmm.
for a few reasons. And we don't really know, I don't know all their details, but as we kind of discussed in this forum, there were a few things that came up. One was the idea of feeling okay 20 years from now. That can be really hard for somebody who feels like they are scraping the bottom of the barrel. Like, do I have to do this for the next 20 years? I don't want to feel this way for 20 years. So there was that psychological side of it. But there was also this idea of maybe they're actually doing okay. Why are they feeling like they are scraping the barrel? Is it some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, where it's like we start to say something so often and so loudly that we just own it. The idea of you have to put stuff aside for retirement. Maybe it's a certain percentage. Maybe, yeah, I don't. We'll just go with a certain percentage because that's one of the things that a lot of people say. And so maybe you're feeling like, if I do this forever, I'm always going to feel like I don't have anything, and there that can really grate on you for a little bit. But then also the idea of, okay, well, I'm in a spot where I feel okay, but do I know that that amount is going to be okay in 20 years? Because there's all these unknowns of, with inflation and not knowing what, like, maybe they say $1 million, like, right, that seems to be the number that's out there. If you have $1 million saved by this particular age, you'll be fine. And some people now are going, but is it enough? And so there's all these questions of, I don't really know. So for all those reasons, this couple was struggling with understanding that they're going to be okay. And one of the tendencies was to say, you're doing so much better than, I don't know what percentage he said, 55, 90% of the
Hmm.
people at your age group, right?
Hmm.
And the intention there, which was an awesome intention, is to help that individual start to recognize that they're actually doing okay. So I want to ask you, why would I or anybody else in the discussion suggest that even though the intention was good, it could still be a dangerous comparison?
So I agree the intention is good, and I've even done something similar with people before as well.
Mhm.
I've done
As
it
have I.
done it for
Yep.
myself as
Mhm.
well. Doesn't
Yep.
necessarily mean it's the most effective way, but it's the intention's good, right?
Yep.
But the question was, how could it be dangerous?
Mhm.
Um, I'm just gonna throw this out there and just say because it takes the attention and energy off of you and it gives it to someone else.
Mm. I like that. I
Mhm.
like the way that you stated that.
Yeah, because like, you know, whatever you put your focus on is where your energy and your focus and your time and your resources and everything is going to go to, so like
Mhm.
if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, well, all of that, all of like the best part of you is going to go somewhere else other than for you, and it's like, well, if you actually want to improve yourself, if you want to improve your situation, well, what would make sense? I mean, do you give it to something or someone else, or do you keep it for yourself?
Mhm. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, I do, and I really
Mhm.
like that, the way that you're looking at that. It also takes away the energy in order to address some of those psychological issues that I was talking about earlier, and,
Mhm.
understanding contentment, understanding, um, just the idea of, like, feeling scarce all the time. Like, those are
Mhm.
things that can be worked on, but if you're throwing your energy somewhere else and, sending all your time looking at what everyone else is doing, then you won't have as much of that time and energy to be able to go forward. I agree with that. And I was thinking as I was talking to you, dangerous sounds like kind of a dramatic word. So it's not something that's going to be, where it's going to put your life in danger necessarily, but it might be counterproductive. Maybe that's a better word for that. And so I just want to correct myself as we talk through this. I wonder, what could we as coaches do in order to get the good part of comparing and avoid some of that counterproductive part? Any idea?
Well, I think it goes kind of hand in hand with what I just talked about, which is like if you're gonna compare to anyone, maybe just compare to yourself, kind of
Hmm.
thing, you
Hmm.
know. And it could be in a couple different ways. Like it could be like, hey, you know, uh, what were things like at this point last year, or 5 years ago, or
Hmm.
anything like that, right?
Hmm.
Or it could also be like, hey, you know, this is where I'm currently at, and this is where I ultimately want to be. So I'm just going to focus on doing what I need to become that best version of me, not the
Hmm.
best version for anyone else, but just for me, kind of
Hmm.
thing. And I think
Yeah.
that once you accomplish that, like you're gonna be feeling so content, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because you're focused on you and what
Hmm.
you want, what you need, versus having the approval from other people on what they expect from you or what they want for you.
Hmm. Thank you for using the word approval. I
Hmm.
think that that is such it is something that people are looking for.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're looking for it because we didn't get that as kids from our parents,
Hmm.
like that we never did something that was good enough or whatever. And sometimes we feel that like our adolescence, just the way our brains are as adolescents, we're constantly seeking approval of our peers. And I think as you grow into, I mean, maybe I think that the brain doesn't fully develop, the frontal part of your brain doesn't fully develop to like 25. And a lot of people, our young adults, are making some of these decisions from age 18 to 25. And so even in that time, they're probably still seeking the validation and the approval of peers. And so we're making decisions based on something that is not super valid, right? Like, we're not fully developed, at least. So when you say approval, I'm like, yep, that's oftentimes what we're looking for. You also mentioned the best version of yourself. I appreciate that so much because it encompasses so much more than just where we are financially.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I told you at the beginning or halfway through this that we were going to talk about, or I'd mentioned the measure up. And that's actually one of the things that I send out to my potential clients is how do you measure up? And I title it that on purpose because I think that that's one of the things that people are constantly looking at. How am I measuring up to, what society says to all this? And then what happens though is that title is there, but then as they work through this worksheet or this questionnaire, it's truly asking how do they measure up to what they want, to who they want to become. And there are some things in there about their finances, but there's also stuff in there about who they are becoming, and what are some of the values that they have, or what are some of the values they think they have, but their actions aren't actually in alignment with that. And so I think when we give our clients an opportunity to not just say, well, you don't need to worry about, don't compare yourself at all. Well, it's human to compare yourself. Like you
Hmm.
said, we do it every day, several times a day. So for us to just say, well, we're not going to do that anymore, that's not going to work, you know?
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
that's the other thing as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talk about this all the time. I mean, finances is way more than just the money. Like
Yeah.
it really is about working on yourself and becoming that best version, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it might be, kind of thing. So this kind of goes hand in hand. But kind of to go back on a different point, with when you were talking about basically comparing yourself to yourself, kind of thing. Um, Perfect example of how I've even done this recently in my life. So if you remember, like going way back towards the beginning of the second quarter, it's probably like March, April, something like that. We talked about like those ebbs and flows, right?
Hmm.
And for those of you who don't know, like the first quarter of this year was probably the most challenging quarter that I've had since I started coaching. And why? I don't exactly know. I have a couple ideas as to why, but that's just the fact of the matter. Like it just kind of happened. And during that period of time, I was comparing myself to myself because of, where I was at with year to date as far as revenue goes and stuff like that. And while that was uncomfortable, it also really, really lit a fire under me. And I wasn't putting focus in, well, what are other coaches doing? Or, like what's like the tycoons of the industry doing? Like that kind of thing, right? Like
Hmm.
I just focused on me and I said, like, I just want to beat me. That's
Hmm.
all I care about beating. Like I don't care about beating Joe or Sally or Dave or whoever it might be. Like I just want to beat me. And because of that, like it lit that fire under me. I started being really, really consistent with things. I started going after things more frequently, and now I've gotten out of that hole, and now I'm 14-15% above where I was last year, and now I'm comparing myself to that as well. And you would think like, well, if you had that fire when you were behind, does that mean that now that you're ahead, that you're starting to chill out?
Hmm.
And the answer would be no, because I wasn't trying to catch up with myself when I was
Hmm.
behind.
Hmm.
I was trying to get back to where I was, A, but ultimately, B, I'm really just trying to be the best that I can be for
Hmm.
me and for the people that I serve.
Hmm.
So that's what's keeping the fire ignited now. And again, I don't care what you're doing, Maria. I don't care what Mike and Nino are doing. I don't care what Baraket is doing. I don't care about what, the person who's listening to this is doing. I just care about me and trying to get to my own level of excellence that I know I can get to.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that's incredible. I mean, it sounded kind of harsh that you don't care what we're doing, but I know what you meant.
I'm cheering for you. I'm cheering for you.
As did our listeners. I
You
know
know,
they
what
know
I
you.
mean by that is like I'm not measuring myself to you, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I know
Yeah.
what you meant. I'm just messing with you. So yeah, and that's why you continue to grow at the rate that you continue to grow. Because if you compared yourself to all of the financial coaches, I mean, you are probably at one of the higher earning financial coaches out there if you look at that scale. And it would be very tempting or easy for you to say, you know what, I've kind of arrived and I'm not going to worry about this anymore.
Mhm.
And then you would slow down. And then eventually, because it took you a while to get up to that spot, it would take a while to go back down as well. Because it's,
Mhm.
there, any decisions that we have has a tail to it. And so it would take a little bit for you to experience the ebb, if you will.
Mhm.
But you're not doing that. And so because you're not doing that, you're able to continue to grow, and you're not looking at the people who have not reached that level. And if you're looking at anybody who has reached a higher level, it's so that you can aspire to be a little bit more, not like them, but a little bit closer to where they are in relation to who you want to be. And I
Mhm.
think that's a really important distinction, even when we're talking about aspirations.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that you're probably correct. Like I'm probably in that higher tier where I don't really know.
I don't either.
And
I'm just
I
guessing.
also don't really care either, but I
Mhm.
do recognize that. But there are people like, that I find online who have these like massive Instagram followers or TikTok followers. And I see those people and I'm like, okay, how can I learn from this person? I'm
Mhm.
not looking at them and being like, "Oh, I'll never get there," or, like, "It sucks that they have so many and I have so little." Like, that stuff never crosses my mind. It's always how can I learn from them to
Mhm.
improve myself kind of thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and I think that that's healthy,
Yeah.
but you can cross a threshold to where if you are just looking for the surface level and the validation and stuff like that, that's where it can become dangerous, like what
Mhm.
we were talking about earlier.
Yep. And I also think as you're talking about like number of followers, et cetera, if you compare the measurable number, like, oh, they've got this number of followers and I'll never get there, or even if you do get there, even if you surpass it, I think the below the surface question is, who cares? What does it
Mhm.
represent?
Mhm.
And why do you care? Not saying like who cares, like you shouldn't care, but who is worried about that and why? What does it mean to you? So as you are looking at those follower numbers, as you're looking at the number of views, aspire to it, but understand why you're aspiring to it and understand what it means to you. What does it represent, rather than just saying, oh, I want to surpass this particular person or this particular benchmark. For what purpose? Right. So it's all
Mhm.
about really understanding the purpose behind some of those aspirations you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Now before we wrap up this episode, there's been one thought that's kind of came to me very early in this episode, and we never really had like an organic way of me to just kind of working it in.
Okay.
So this is me just saying, "Hey, I'm just going to work it in at the end,"
All right.
and just kind of cram it in. Um, so thinking about comparison, who are the two richest men in the world?
I I'm admittedly probably not going to know the answer to this, but I'm going to guess Jeff Bezos
Hmm.
and uh, um,
He's
I don't know,
everywhere.
Elon Musk maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Yay for me. I know an answer that I didn't
Okay.
know I knew.
Cool. So I don't know how these people operate. I don't know them or anything like that.
You don't?
But let's just paint a picture and pretend a little bit, okay?
All right.
So Elon Musk, I believe, is the richest man in the world,
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure that Jeff Bezos is the second richest. Kind of.
Okay.
So could you imagine if Jeff Bezos looked at someone like Elon Musk and compared himself to Elon, and he goes, "Oh, I'm not good enough. This other guy's ahead of me. I'm falling behind. I got to do this. I got to do that." And he just puts all of his energy towards Elon. It's like, what kind of quality of life is that? Like,
Mhm.
bro, You're the second richest guy in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you're over here comparing yourself to the number one. Like you got 8 billion other people below you. You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine if Jeff actually did that? And conversely, could you imagine if Jeff actually just focused on comparing himself to himself? Maybe he recognized that Elon was ahead of him, and he was like, okay, noted, but I'm really going to focus on me. Like, I'm going to take this observation that Elon is doing better than me, financially speaking. He's got more net worth than me. So I'm going to really focus on what I need to do to improve myself, to improve my company, to improve this, to improve that. And not only is he going to be more content and more centered mentally and emotionally with doing that, but also if he's focused on improving himself and his company, being Amazon, he's going to improve the quality of the lives for his employees. And he's also going to improve the quality that his customers are going to get as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about this whole analogy, because that's really what this is. It's an analogy. Because it's a good example of, like, when you focus on yourself, it's not just about improving you. It's also about improving the people around you and in your network in the best possible way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that. I need to get that out before we wrap up this episode.
No, I'm glad that you did. And the only other thing that I'll Mariaify that with is those of you who have listened for a while know exactly what I mean by that, is that in your analogy, you were focused on the measurable net worth, which I appreciate and I understand why
Yep.
you would do that.
Yep.
And I'm really glad that you went to him improving himself and the lives of other people, et cetera, et cetera. And the only thing I want to add is that, and it's really just not even something that you missed, it's just, I'm emphasizing it, is that net worth is just a number. And
Right.
it's all of the other stuff that really is important. So and again, I don't know either one of these guys personally either, but if either one of them has all of the money in the world, but doesn't have the stuff that's important to them, does it really matter anymore?
Right.
So that's the only other thing I would throw on there. So as you guys are trying to figure out, how to compare yourself to yourself and who to aspire to, I would really encourage you not to just look at people who have certain numbers in their world, but who has some of the other stuff, and I'm using quotes on purpose, that you're looking for, whether it is relationships with their family, maybe it's having a family. There are so many people who have a lot of money, but don't have family. And maybe that's important to them. But for somebody like myself, I would trade in all the money so that I could have my family instead. And so there are some of those things to keep in mind, not just for yourself, listeners, but for your clients as well. When you're walking them through, like, who do they want to become and what do they want their lives to look like? Remember to kind of dig into some of those values too, so that they can use the measurable stuff in order to measure their progress, but not with losing sight of what's truly important to them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Completely agree.
Cool.
Alrighty. Well, good episode, good talk.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast, guys. Don't forget to join our Facebook group, to leave a review, to share the show, all of that good stuff. Again, we would really appreciate that. And we'll catch you next week for a very, very special episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast.
200. That's crazy. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.